Matt Goodwin, who we've already mentioned, he's repopularized the notion that our political class are presiding over a managed decline in Britain, and suggested that it's only going to accelerate under Labour. What is the truth, do you think, about Britain's course? There seems to be quite a lot of black-pilled views out there. Where do you think we're headed? Do you think this is the period of managed decline, and do you see any way out of it?
It is. That's a very big question. So if we go on, as I think we're going to go on with, governance under Labour or the Tory party, as they have been, they may change, of course, but then there's no doubt at all the country just slides down the tubes. It's really quite appalling if you look at the fundamentals, the basics, the things that the government should be able to do that are crumbling. And it sounds terribly dramatic, but you have to say, if you're honest about it, it really does represent, sort of civilizational decline. If you stand back and look at what is happening, the failure of the state to do fundamental things is a message. It's a warning, actually, that things could deteriorate rapidly. You could use Hemingway's analogy with debt. I think it's a very good one. How did you become bankrupt? Well, gradually, very gradually, and all of a sudden. So things could unwind really badly in the next decade, or even before. So just if you run through the things that a competent state should be able to do, maybe start with energy. A state that's as well endowed as Britain ought to be able to be self-sufficient in energy, but it isn't, because we've never bothered to invest to make sure that happens. We started the nuclear industry in the 50s, pioneers, and we've let it degrade, and then we go begging to foreign states to complete the big projects, and you don't have the will to do it. It's not because he didn't have the expertise to do it. After all, we're forever bragging about how good our world-class universities are. No, it was a lack of ambition. And that's true. What's true of nuclear is true of hydrocarbons and all the other things, and some of the renewables, actually, although we're becoming a very large renewable producer. A lot of those renewables are owned by the foreign investors, and a lot of the tech, the interesting stuff, is Danish or German controlled or Chinese. So yeah, the fundamentals of getting a policy together on energy, we failed in. And as a result, we import about half of the UK's trade deficit is comprised with energy imports. So, whether it's through the interconnectors or hydrocarbons and gas just brought in. So really crazy, 40 billion roughly and that's it's not necessary to have that. So that's a big failure. The failure to have a housing market which gives citizens a reasonable chance of renting or buying a house at a reasonable price. Massive failure. And it puts pressure on household budgets, which puts pressure on couples and families, which undoubtedly leads to more family breakup, because you pile pressure on a young marriage, and often it won't withstand that pressure. So, this is not socially useful to have very, very expensive housing. I know the banks like it. And, it's become a sort of a circus, really, in terms of how we finance it. And we've become addicted to rising highest prices. But it's not socially useful. It's not a good policy. And then you look more widely at policies like immigration and the border. The failure, honestly, John, the failure of a modern state to protect its borders, or even to have a political class that has the wit or desire to protect its borders, that's a major warning sign. That is, you allow tens of thousands of people just to wander into your state. I've said before, and I'm not being over dramatic, you will not be a coherent state for very long if you allow that. And we seem governed by people that can't even sniff the air and see the dangers of running a policy like that. So I'm very concerned about that. I think that's just an emblem of total misgovernance. And then there's a wider problem about the labour market. The way that the labour market is a complete there's been a complete shambles for a long time. Broadly, our membership of the European community, we raised a generation of politicians that ignored the need to do any skills training or vocational training, or even to match labour market requirements with the supply of skills. And that's because you could just ship people in through the EU, and they got used to that. And so then when they, you have an addiction problem, which you just solve by importing more and more people. So now this country has nearly 10 million people, 9.5 million adults who are not in the labour supply, 5.5 million are out of work benefits, another 4.5 million, just retiring or not being actively involved. Meanwhile, we ship in gross, 1.2 million a year, 1.3 million a year sometimes to plug labour market gaps. But a lot of that's very low skilled labour, which on the data, if the media will actually report it, it's just disastrous financially, because the people we're importing are not net contributors to the public finances. They will consume resources. So the whole thing is a disaster, and unless we face up to a few realities, it will just get worse. So I totally agree with I'm not being dramatic. I think if you can look at the figures alone and you're honest about it, you'll see the country in quite serious decline, and it will take a lot to get to reverse it.